The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister-in-law, Delilah, raise her glass, that familiar smirk playing across her lips. The entire backyard had gone quiet. 37 guests all turned toward me, their faces illuminated by the string lights Drake had hung that morning for my 50th birthday party. My heart hammered against my ribs as Delilah's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. "All this for her?" she said, gesturing dramatically at the decorations, the catered spread, the live jazz trio. Her laugh was sharp, theatrical. "I mean, really, Drake, you've outdone yourself for little old Marlena." The word little dripped with condescension. I felt heat creep up my neck, that familiar burn of humiliation I'd swallowed for 15 years of family gatherings. Around us, conversations stuttered and died. My best friend Cora shot me a look from across the patio, her dark eyes flashing with protective anger. But Drake, my husband of 22 years, just chuckled and shook his head like Delilah had made some charming observation about the weather. "You know how Delilah is," he said to the crowd, as if that explained everything, as if that made it acceptable. I felt the familiar weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on me. Smile, Marlena. Laugh it off, Marlena. Don't make a scene, Marlena. Don't be dramatic. Don't be difficult. Be grateful for what you have. But tonight was different. Tonight, I had something they didn't know about. I lifted my own glass, my hand steady now, and smiled. Really smiled. For the first time all evening. "Oh, Delilah," I said, my voice carrying just far enough for everyone to hear. "Wait for the real gift." The confusion on Delilah's face was almost worth the 15 years of snide comments, the passive-aggressive texts, the way she'd somehow managed to turn every family gathering into the Delilah show. She tilted her head like a confused golden retriever, her perfectly styled blonde bob catching the light. "Real gift? What do you mean, sweetie?" That word, sweetie, delivered with the same tone you'd use to address a slow child. My jaw clenched, but I kept smiling as I pulled out my phone. The jazz trio had stopped playing, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Even the catering staff had paused their cleanup to watch. "Well," I said, my thumb hovering over the screen, "you know how you're always telling everyone that I don't contribute anything meaningful to this family? That I'm just Drake's little housewife who doesn't understand the real world?" I looked around at the faces watching us, our neighbors, Drake's colleagues, family members who'd heard Delilah's subtle digs for years, but never said anything. Drake's smile faltered. "Marlena, what are you—" 15 years, Delilah," I continued, my voice gaining strength. 15 years of you telling people I'm too fragile for business discussions, too simple to understand family finances. Remember last Christmas when you said I probably didn't even know what Drake does for work? Cora stepped closer, positioning herself at my shoulder like a bodyguard. She'd been there that night, had seen me lock myself in the bathroom afterward and cry until my mascara ran black streaks down my cheeks. Delilah's laugh was brittle now. "Oh, honey, you're being so sensitive. I was just teasing. Were you teasing 3 months ago when you told your book club that Drake deserved better? That he could have married someone with actual ambition?" The words came out steady, controlled, even though my pulse was racing. "Because Bethany Morrison recorded that whole conversation on her phone. Isn't technology wonderful?" The color drained from Delilah's face so fast, I thought she might faint right there on my patio. Her champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering against the stone with a sharp crack that made half the guests jump. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held everyone frozen, and suddenly there was movement. People stepping closer, phones being discreetly pulled out, whispered conversations starting and stopping. "You're lying," Delilah whispered, but her voice shook. "Bethany wouldn't. She's my friend." "Was your friend?" I corrected, tapping my phone screen. Until she heard you calling her husband a spineless fool for not divorcing his pathetic excuse for a wife. Funny how quickly friendships change when people show their true colors. Drake was staring at me like he'd never seen me before, his mouth slightly open. 22 years of marriage, and he genuinely looked shocked that I might have my own sources of information, my own network of relationships that didn't revolve around him. It would have been almost funny if it wasn't so heartbreaking. "Marlena," he said carefully, "maybe we should discuss this privately." "Oh, no," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet backyard. "We've had 22 years of private discussions where I swallow my pride and pretend your sister's cruelty doesn't matter, where I smile and nod while she systematically destroys my confidence in front of our family and friends." I looked directly at Delilah, who was gripping the back of a chair so hard her knuckles were white. "Did you really think I was too stupid to figure out what you were doing? Too weak to fight back?" Cora's hand touched my elbow, a gentle reminder that she was there, that I wasn't alone in this. She'd been the one to encourage me to start documenting things, to stop pretending that Delilah's behavior was normal, sisterly teasing. She'd been the one to help me see that what I was experiencing had a name: psychological abuse. "I built a career in marketing before I married Drake," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I gave it up to support his dreams, to raise our children, to make our house a home. But apparently, that makes me worthless in your eyes." "You want to know what's really pathetic?" I said, my finger hovering over the play button. The patio had gone so quiet, I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler system cycling on 3 houses down. "It's how you convinced everyone, including me for way too long, that your jealousy was just concern for family." Delilah's face twisted. "Jealousy? Of what exactly? Your little domestic life?" That laugh again, but shakier now. Desperate. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I actually knew, how much damage control she'd need to do. The funny thing was, she still thought she could manage the situation, still believed she held all the cards. "Jealous of the fact that Drake chose me," I said simply. "Jealous that he built a life with me that didn't revolve around managing your emotions and cleaning up your messes." I looked around at the faces watching us. Some shocked, some uncomfortable, but many nodding slightly like pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. How many family dinners have been ruined because Delilah needed to be the center of attention? How many holidays ended with her in tears because someone else got a moment in the spotlight? Drake's face had gone ashen. "Marlena, that's not. She doesn't—" "Doesn't what, honey?" I turned to face my husband fully, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what I might see in his eyes. "Doesn't manipulate every situation to be about her? Doesn't call you crying at midnight because she's fighting with whatever boyfriend she's destroying this month? Doesn't show up at our house uninvited whenever she decides she needs something?" Our daughter, Sophia, home from college for my birthday, was standing near the back door with her mouth hanging open. She was 20, old enough to remember the patterns, old enough to recognize the truth when she heard it. I saw recognition dawning on her face. All those times Aunt Delilah had made sarcastic comments about Mom, all those family gatherings that ended in tension she couldn't quite understand as a child. Cora stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "Show them the video, Marlena. Show them who she really is." My thumb pressed down on the play button, and suddenly Delilah's voice filled the evening air through my phone's speaker. But this wasn't the controlled, syrupy, sweet voice she used in public. This was raw, venomous, unfiltered hatred. "Honestly, I don't know what Drake was thinking," came Delilah's recorded voice, crystal clear despite the background noise of what sounded like a restaurant. 22 years with that woman, and what does he have to show for it? A wife who spends his money decorating their house like some basic Pinterest board, and 2 kids who barely visit." The guests around us shifted uncomfortably. Someone gasped. I saw Mrs. Peterson from next door actually take a step backward, as if the words themselves were toxic. But the recording wasn't finished. Delilah's voice continued, gaining momentum like a runaway train. And don't get me started on how she guilt-tripped him into that ridiculous house renovation last year. $200,000 so she could play interior designer while contributing absolutely nothing to their actual income. If I were him, I'd have divorced her years ago and found someone with actual substance. The real Delilah standing in front of me had gone pale as paper. "Turn it off," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the continuing playback. "The worst part is how she acts like she's some kind of victim," the recorded voice went on. "Poor little Marlena, so sensitive, so fragile. Meanwhile, she's manipulating Drake into giving her everything she wants while doing the absolute minimum. I swear, if my brother had any backbone left, he'd see what a parasite she really is." The silence that followed was deafening. 37 people stood frozen on my patio, staring at Delilah like they'd never seen her before. Because they hadn't. Not really. They'd seen the carefully constructed public persona, the devoted sister act, the concerned family member routine. Drake's face had gone through several color changes during the playback. Now he was staring at his sister with something I'd never seen before. Genuine shock mixed with what looked like dawning horror. "Delilah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You said those things? About Marlena? About our marriage?" Delilah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I didn't mean, that was taken out of context." "What context?" Sophia stepped forward, her young voice cutting through the adult's shock. "What context makes it okay to call my mom a parasite? Out of context?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Bethany recorded 4 hours of conversation that night, Delilah. 4 hours of you systematically tearing apart not just me, but Drake, our children, our marriage, our entire life." I held up my phone again. Should I play the part where you told them Drake was weak for letting me get away with being useless? Or maybe the section where you discussed how you could help him see the light about divorcing me? Drake took a step toward his sister, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw him look at Delilah the way he should have been looking at her all along, like someone who had betrayed his family. "You've been plotting against my wife? Against my marriage?" "Not plotting," Delilah said quickly, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "Just concerned. I'm concerned about you, Drake. She's isolated you from your friends, made you dependent on her approval for everything." "Stop." Drake's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "Just stop talking." The transformation in my husband was remarkable. 22 years I'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for him to see what his sister really was, waiting for him to choose us over her manufactured drama. His shoulders straightened, his jaw set, and when he looked at me, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. "How long have you known?" he asked me, his voice gentle now. "How long have you been carrying this alone?" The question broke something loose in my chest. 3 years since I started documenting it seriously. But Drake, I've been telling you for 15 years that something was wrong. Every time I tried to explain how she made me feel, you said I was being too sensitive. Every time I asked you to set boundaries, you said family was complicated. Cora stepped closer, her hand finding my shoulder. She's been recording conversations, taking screenshots of texts, keeping a journal of incidents since 2021. I helped her organize it all. The crowd was stirring now, people beginning to murmur among themselves. I could see the social calculations happening in real time, whose side to take, how to distance themselves from the mess, how to process the fact that they'd been witnesses to years of psychological abuse disguised as family dynamics. Mrs. Peterson spoke up from the back. "Delilah, honey, I think you should probably leave. It was such a simple statement, delivered in such a matter-of-fact tone, but it carried the weight of social judgment. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a community decision about acceptable behavior. Delilah's eyes darted frantically around the patio, searching for allies, for someone who might still believe her version of events. But the faces staring back at her had changed. The polite smiles were gone, replaced by uncomfortable recognition and growing disgust. She was watching her carefully constructed social network crumble in real time. "This is insane," she said, her voice rising to an almost shriek. "You're all acting like I'm some kind of monster. I love my brother. Everything I've ever done has been to protect him from making mistakes." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She's manipulated all of you. Can't you see what she's doing? She's turning you against family." But Drake stepped forward, positioning himself between his sister and me for the first time in our marriage. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. "No, Delilah, you did that yourself. Marlena didn't force you to say those things. Marlena didn't make you spend 15 years undermining our marriage." "I was trying to help." "Help?" Sophia's voice cracked with emotion. "You called our family a mistake. You said Dad should divorce Mom and that we barely visit because we don't respect her." Our daughter's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was strong. "I heard it all, Aunt Delilah. We all did." I watched my sister-in-law realize that her nuclear option, playing the victim, crying, making everyone else feel guilty for confronting her, wasn't going to work. Not anymore. Not when 37 people had just heard her true feelings in her own voice. Cora cleared her throat and stepped forward, pulling out her own phone. "Would you like to hear the text messages too? Because Marlena's been forwarding me screenshots for years. Like the one where you told your cousin that Marlena was dead weight, and that Drake deserved someone who could match his success." The final piece of color drained from Delilah's face. She hadn't known about the text messages, hadn't realized that her poison had been spreading through digital channels that could be traced, saved, documented. "Or," Cora continued relentlessly, "we could discuss the phone call you made to Drake's business partner last year, suggesting that Marlena's emotional instability might be affecting his work performance. Yes, Marcus told us about that conversation eventually." Drake's head snapped toward his sister, his expression shifting from shock to something approaching fury. "You contacted Marcus? You tried to sabotage my business relationships?" The crowd was pressing closer now, drawn by the spectacle, but also by genuine concern for what they were witnessing. This wasn't just family drama. This was the systematic exposure of psychological warfare. The silence that followed Cora's revelation was different from the earlier quiet. This was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room full of people processing betrayal on multiple levels. Drake's face had gone through shock, hurt, and was now settling into something I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating anger. "You called Marcus," he repeated slowly, each word deliberate. "You told my business partner that my wife was emotionally unstable. Do you have any idea what that could have cost me? What it could have cost our family?" Delilah's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. For the first time in 15 years, she had no quick comeback, no deflection, no way to twist the situation back to her advantage. "I can answer that," I said, my voice steady and clear. "It cost us the Henderson account. Remember, Drake? When Marcus suddenly became distant last fall, started questioning your judgment on projects? When he suggested maybe you needed some personal time to handle family issues?" I looked directly at Delilah. "That was your phone call working its magic." Drake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. That account was worth $80,000. $80,000 that should have gone toward Sophia's senior year, toward our retirement, toward our life together. His voice was low, dangerous. "And you, my own sister, You sabotaged that because you couldn't stand to see Marlena happy. The guests were backing away now, sensing the shift from public humiliation to something more primal. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about real damage, financial consequences, the destruction of trust that went bone deep. Delilah finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. I never meant for that to happen. I was just worried about you, about the family. Worried about the family? Sophia stepped forward again, her 20-year-old righteous anger blazing. You tried to destroy our family. You cost Dad money. You made Mom cry herself to sleep more nights than I can count. And you made every holiday a nightmare because we never knew when you'd start your drama. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. My daughter had been watching, had been aware of the toll Delilah's behavior was taking on all of us. How many family memories had been tainted by the fear of Delilah's next outburst, her next calculated cruelty? Cora moved closer to me, her presence a steady reminder that I wasn't alone in this moment of reckoning. The really sad part, she said, addressing the crowd but looking at Delilah, is that Marlena spent years making excuses for you, years protecting you from the consequences of your own behavior because she didn't want to hurt Drake. Drake turned away from his sister completely, his body language making it clear that as far as he was concerned, she no longer existed. When he looked at me, his eyes were full of something I'd been waiting 22 years to see. Complete, unwavering support. Marlena, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I am so sorry. I failed you. I failed our family. I let her poison our lives for years because I was too much of a coward to see what was right in front of me. The apology I dreamed of hearing, but now that it was finally happening, I felt something unexpected, not triumph, but a deep, bone-deep exhaustion. All those years of carrying this burden alone, of being gaslit and dismissed, of questioning my own sanity while everyone told me I was being too sensitive. I know you're sorry, I said quietly. But Drake, this can't happen again. Ever. She doesn't get to come back from this with tears and apologies and promises to do better. She doesn't get to manipulate her way back into our lives in 6 months when everyone's forgotten tonight. He nodded immediately, no hesitation. She's done. We're done. I should have protected you from day one, and I didn't. But I'm protecting you now. Delilah made one last, desperate attempt, her voice cracking as she reached toward Drake. You can't mean that. I'm your sister. We're family. You can't just throw away 38 years because of some misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? The word came out of me like a whip crack. You tried to destroy my marriage, sabotage my husband's career, and poison my children against me. You spent 15 years systematically trying to convince everyone I knew that I was worthless. That's not a misunderstanding. That's psychological warfare. The guests around us had gone completely silent again, but this time it felt different. They weren't just witnessing drama anymore. They were witnessing justice. I could see it in their faces, the recognition that this moment was bigger than family conflict. This was about standing up to bullies, about refusing to enable toxic behavior, about the courage it takes to finally say, enough. Cora stepped forward and handed me something I hadn't expected, a folded piece of paper. This is a restraining order application, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Marlena and I filled it out last week. We were hoping tonight would go differently, but honestly, we came prepared either way. The paper felt solid in my hands, real in a way that made everything else crystallize. This wasn't just about one confrontation. This was about reclaiming my entire life. Delilah stared at the document like it was a snake. You can't be serious. A restraining order? Against family? Against an abuser, I corrected. Because that's what you are, Delilah. You're an abuser who hid behind family loyalty for 15 years. The restraining order papers seemed to break whatever spell had been holding Delilah together. She looked around the patio one final time, seeing nothing but faces that had turned away from her, people who would never look at her the same way again. Her carefully constructed social position had crumbled completely in the space of 30 minutes. "This isn't over," she whispered. But there was no fight left in her voice. It was the desperate threat of someone who had already lost everything. "Yes, it is," Drake said with finality. "Security will escort you off the property. Don't contact us again. Don't contact our friends. Don't show up at family events expecting things to go back to normal. You made your choice tonight. Actually, you made it years ago. We're just finally responding appropriately." As Delilah gathered her purse with shaking hands and walked toward the gate, something remarkable happened. The guests who had been frozen in shock began to move toward me. Mrs. Peterson was the first, putting her arm around my shoulders. "Honey, I am so sorry you went through that alone for so long." One by one, people who had witnessed Delilah's behavior over the years began apologizing for not speaking up, for not seeing, for enabling her by staying silent. It was a moment of collective recognition that sometimes standing by and doing nothing makes you complicit in someone else's pain. Sophia wrapped me in a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. I'm so sorry I didn't understand before tonight how bad it really was." Drake stood beside us, his arm around my waist, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like we were truly a team. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, some concerned, some admiring, all of them seeing me differently than they had an hour ago. Not as the quiet, accommodating wife who kept the peace, but as a woman who had endured years of abuse and finally found the strength to fight back. "Now," I said, my voice stronger than it had ever been, "we live our lives without walking on eggshells, without managing someone else's emotions, without pretending that cruelty is just family dynamics." I paused, feeling the weight of 15 years lifting off my shoulders. Now we're free. The party continued, but it was different. Lighter somehow, as if the removal of Delilah's toxic presence had allowed everyone to breathe again. People stayed later than planned, the conversations flowing more easily than they had at any family gathering in years. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Cora squeezed my hand. "How does it feel to be the hero of your own story, finally?" I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in longer than I could remember. "It feels like coming home to myself. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from."